Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
This week and next week we bring you a two-part series dealing with a review and a discussion of federal laws that very much affect law enforcement on American Native reservations around this country. There are some very challenging and serious problems with some of that legislation, and we want to first talk about what is the problem, and next week talk about solutions. In order to carry out those goals, I am so pleased to welcome to the program Charpa Matheson, who is an elected member of the Coeur d'Alene Tribal Council. I'm so pleased to also say that Charpa is a former student of mine, and congratulations in the position you hold on the council, and thank you for being with us for these two programs.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm so pleased to have our regular panelist, Janelle Burke, who will start the question today with our guest.
Charpa, we're pleased to have you here and to talk about jurisdiction, actually. This is a jurisdictional question. For the benefit of our viewers, can you tell them what the differences are between lands where the Native Americans, Native American reservation land, for example, and land perhaps just outside the borders? Can you tell us something about the differences in the laws that are on the two various areas?
Well, first of all, I think there's kind of a misconception to begin with that when you enter a reservation, a lot of people assume that tribal police are going to have jurisdiction of anyone that enters, that territory. Just the same as if you go into a different state, the state police there would have jurisdiction. If you go into a different county, they have jurisdiction. Or even if you go to campus police, they have jurisdiction of any crime that occurs there, no matter who you are. But once you go into an Indian reservation, like you suggested, it becomes a little more complicated. In many reservations, the land is all divided between non-Indian and Indian. So the Indian land is what we call trust land, and the non-Indian land is what we call fee land. And the jurisdiction can change literally from one street to the next or one yard to the next, depending on what kind of property it is. So say you go into a reservation like the Coeur d'Alene Indian Reservation where I'm from, it's called what we call today a checkerboard reservation, which means that some of the land's tribal and some of it's non-tribal. And in our case down there, I think there's a slight majority of non-tribal land. Then as a result, when you go into a reservation like that, tribal police, they have jurisdiction only on all tribal members, regardless of where they are within those boundaries. And they have jurisdiction over other federally recognized tribal members as well from other tribes. And so then the end result is they only have jurisdiction over Native American people, but the non-Indian landowners or residents or whatnot, they don't have jurisdiction of them. No criminal jurisdiction. They can't arrest them. They can't prosecute them for any crimes, regardless of where they commit the crime. So it doesn't matter if they commit the crime in tribal property or not. There's still no jurisdiction for them to be dealt with accordingly. So it's not so much the land or the territory. It's the race of the person determining who has jurisdiction.
So we're not just drawing a fence around the reservation lands.
Correct.
We actually have, as you point out, a checkerboard. And is this pretty true for all reservations throughout the United States?
I wouldn't say it's entirely like that. There's some tribes that own all the property within the boundaries of their reservation. One example is the Navajo reservation. I think they own something like 98% of their land base there within the reservation boundaries. Then you go to some, like the tribes in Oklahoma, they don't own any of the property within their land base there. So it differs depending on where you're at, what tribe you're around. So.
But a good thing for people to know about.
Yeah, correct. Most definitely.
In addition to being a member of the council, the Coeur d'Alene tribe, you also serve on some organizations that of American Indian organizations, and certainly you've had a background in law enforcement before you went on the council. That was part of your responsibility in the tribe. Before we proceed with some other questions, would you share with us those positions you hold and how through that process you're in touch with other tribes on this problem that we're discussing today?
Okay. Prior to being on council, I was appointed as a committee chair for an organization that we call the American, or the the Northwest Tribal Affiliation of Indians, which is ATNI, I guess, kind of got a little bit mixed up, but ATNI is what we call it. And in that organization, we deal with tribal issues that affect all the tribes in the Northwest. It's a regional lobbying organization. And within that organization, we discuss certain things like gaming, zoning issues, economic development, health issues. And one other issue that we deal with is law and justice, or law and order. And that's a committee that I have the pleasure at this time to chair and talk with other 54 tribes that are members of that organization as well. And also I have the pleasure to assist and help out with with the National Congress of American Indians as well, NCAI, which is a national organization similar to ATNI, and we deal with the same issues just on a national level.
So you really are in touch with different tribes as it relates to this question of law enforcement and controlling crime from a perspective of across the country. And we've advertised this program as one dealing with a national problem and federal laws. Mm-hmm. I've had the pleasure of talking to you on a number of occasions about different issues, and certainly on this one we sat in your office, and I was very, very disturbed by the hindrance that you have for lack of proper public policy. Mm-hmm. Take a few minutes to share with us, under federal regulations or federal laws, the definition of why, when you have a tribal government and you have a law enforcement department, what does the law say that restricts you from enforcing laws on the reservation when there are serious crimes like drugs and mm-hmm. murder and rape, if the individuals are non-Indian?
Mm-hmm. Well, to begin with, I think there's two issues that need to be discussed. That's federal policy, I guess, so to say, in regards to jurisdiction and the bottom line of providing community safety. And those two issues, one is as a result of federal policy, we don't have jurisdiction over non-Indians, like I was mentioning earlier. In addition to that, tribal governments don't have the jurisdiction to prosecute for felony crimes. So as a result, we just have misdemeanor jurisdiction over other American Indians. And first, to discuss the first one, which is the issue of race, of who we have jurisdiction over, and why is it that we only have jurisdiction over other American Indians. And that dates back to the late 1800s, when on one of the Sioux reservations in the Dakota Territories at that time, there was an incident between two tribal members of that same tribe, and as a result, one of them was murdered by the other. And at that time, there was no law that said that the federal government can come in and dictate to them how that was going to be resolved or how it's going to be dealt with. So the tribe there at that time, they handled it the way they traditionally would, just with any other type of grievance or any type of mishap like that. And the federal government, the local federal court in that area, was very disappointed in the outcome of the way the tribe handled that. So as a result, they sent in the U.S. federal marshals to arrest this murder suspect. And at that time, they took him to court, and they prosecuted him for murder, first-degree murder. Then they kept appealing that all the way to the Supreme Court. And in that case, today it's called Ex parte versus Crow Dog, since Crow Dog is the name of the suspect in that case. Then in Supreme Court, that's when they said that, since there's no laws there, there's nothing they can do about it. They never had jurisdiction to arrest when it was between two tribal members of a sovereign nation, of what they recognized as a sovereign nation at that time. So as a result, this person had to be let go, and he went back to his home and lived out the rest of his life. But the very next U.S. congressional session, which is I think 6 months later, they passed a new act which is now called the Major Crimes Act, which does take that jurisdiction away from tribes. It takes that felony jurisdiction away. At that time, it only mentioned some of the most obvious crimes, for instance, like murder, rape, burglary, robbery, and some of the most obvious major crimes. But over time, I think the list of these major crimes is expanded to something like 22 crimes, I think, today. And some of those crimes include drug trafficking, prostitution, just anything else, fraud, and some of the other felony crimes.
Almost all major felonies.
Yes, correct. Then dealing with the other issue of, or I guess I kind of combined both of them there, talking about the race and also the felony jurisdiction. But the race part of it, excuse me, I kind of got mixed up there. The race part of it wasn't very clear until like 1977. There was a case over with the Snoqualmie tribe in Washington, over around the Puget Sound area. That time there was a incident, some fair there, some county fair on the reservation there, and tribal police were called over there, and there was a fight, I guess, between a tribal member and a non-tribal member. And in an attempt to separate these two people involved in this incident, the non-tribal member, the non-Indian, became hostile and started hitting the officer and trying to fight them. And as a result, the tribal police arrested him and charged him with battery on an officer and resisting arrest. So this individual went to court. He was prosecuted. He was found guilty. Then he appealed to the district court, the federal district court at that time, and the court there ruled. And his argument was that the tribal court never had jurisdiction to hear the case or to prosecute him. So as a result, that individual won that case in district court. Then the tribe fought all the way up to Supreme Court, and in Supreme Court they ruled that the tribe doesn't have jurisdiction to hear cases in regards to non-Indians, non-tribal members. So that set a precedent which is still effective today. So as a result, there's no jurisdiction for non-Indians in Indian country.
Okay. Let me just take you through several situations. The Coeur d'Alene tribe, like other tribes in the country, you have law enforcement units to enforce the law, and you also have a tribal court. Mm-hmm. This is in several parts. First part is, can members of the law enforcement for the tribe, can they arrest Indians on any charge, including misdemeanors or felonies, but then can only try in tribal court the misdemeanors?
Correct.
And then, if the law enforcement agency of the tribe arrests someone for felony, then that goes into federal court.
If the U.S. Attorney's Office takes the case.
If they take the case.
Yes.
So, but you cannot try a tribal member for a felony in the tribal courts.
Correct.
Okay.
So, just to kind of clarify that,
sure.
Also, within our tribal codes, our tribal criminal codes, we do have such crimes, such felony crimes as rape, murder, and most of them. And we can't prosecute them, but the limitation that we have, mandated by federal law, is that we can't arrest them or we can't incarcerate them for more than 1 year or fine them for more than $5,000.
So, if you arrest and you try and convict someone of misdemeanor, you've dealt with that. But when you make the felony arrest of tribal members, you have to depend upon the U.S. Attorney to bring charges in the federal court.
Correct.
Okay. Now then, one other thing, just for clarification, you're the expert on this, and so a lot of our viewers who've not heard this before will need this clarification.
Okay.
On the same reservation, a non-tribal member, a non-Indian, comes on the reservation and commits, let's say, rape, a serious crime. As you interpret the present law, you cannot either arrest the person. Obviously, you can't try them for that, because you can't even try your own tribal members for a felony. Mm-hmm. So you cannot. Legally, you don't believe you can either arrest the person, and certainly you can't try them. So then you become dependent upon other law enforcement agencies to come in and arrest that person.
Correct.
But you're concerned where you can even hold that individual until the non-tribal law enforcement comes to the reservation.
Correct, and a lot of the time the coordination isn't very smooth either.
Right.
So as a result, maybe if we had the ability to protect ourselves, we'd be able to deal with the incident as we respond to it like any other law enforcement agency. But because we are dependent on outside agencies, whether it's county, state, or FBI, a lot of times we can't do anything. We can't even hold this person a lot of the time until the other agencies respond.
So a lot of times they'll just disappear before they could even be arrested.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Janelle?
Why is this so important to you? I think we all know that it's going to be important, but you may have some reasons that I might not have thought of. Why is this important to you?
The reason why it's important to me is because I live there. I mean, I see firsthand what a lot of this does. And to me, I believe that it's inequality. Under the Constitution, there's a belief that there's equal protection under the law. And when you believe that everywhere you go, like I was saying, you see that the police, law enforcement agencies have jurisdiction to do whatever is necessary, whether it's traffic citation or whether it's to charge someone with murder and protect the victims or whatever it may be. But when you go into any country, it's not like that. A lot of the time you see many crimes there that go unaddressed that wouldn't be tolerated anywhere else. One example in particular, when I was a police officer there, I assisted in a case which was a rape case, and the victim, who was a tribal member, and the suspect as well was a tribal member. And this victim was 16, she was underage, and we arrested the suspect. He told me personally that he did do it, and but since it was a felony crime, we had to wait for the FBI to come in, and they never did. I mean, then they just left it being. They said, "Oh, we'll come down a little bit. We'll come and see what we can do," and kind of kept telling us that. Then before too long, since we are only a misdemeanor court, we had to let the suspect go, and went to the limit of our jurisdiction to do anything, limit to our authority to provide safety for this victim. Then at the end of all that, the suspect was back in the same community as the victim was. And that's just one example. We see things like that happen over and over and over again. And what it becomes, I think, is an equality issue. If something like this happened, let's say in suburban Spokane or anywhere else in America, suburban America, wouldn't be tolerated. But for some reason it happens in Indian country and it's forgotten about. People don't want to deal with it. There is injustice. I mean, there is inequality. And a lot of the times we don't know what to do, don't know who to turn to. So it becomes personal, it becomes an issue where we need to do something. My reservation, I think we could say that it's a lot better than most. There's reservations in South Dakota where there's like 90% unsolved murder rates. Find dead tribal members along the sides of the highway, like every other day sometimes. It's very bad there, and no one does anything because the state doesn't have jurisdiction to investigate these crimes. Tribal police do it to the best of their ability, but ultimately, since they're felony crimes, it's federal jurisdiction.
One question that I have too has to do, and I think you're speaking very eloquently to the fairness issue and to the complexity of the situation, and as well to the fact that it's just difficult to know who this person might be. So my question has to do with how do you know whether a person is a member of the tribe or not? And secondly, are most of the tribal policemen a member of the tribe or someone who easily can identify? In other words, how do you identify? Does it just because a person tells you that they're a member of your tribe or another tribe, does that make it so?
To an extent, I think. But then again, even to ask this, any other agency in the country would say this is racial profiling. I mean, why does the police have to ask you what your race is? Why do they got to ask you if you're Indian? Why, or just any other example? Why would the police want to ask you if you're black, or why do they want to ask you if you're white? I mean, that wouldn't be tolerated. That wouldn't happen anywhere else. But any country, it's mandated by federal law that we have to do that. That we only have jurisdiction over one race of people. So what it amounts to is that we, a lot of the time we do have to ask, if they're a tribal member. A lot of times, sometimes if we're not sure, sometimes, there's requirements to be enrolled in a tribe, and sometimes some of our descendants, some of our relatives don't meet those requirements to be enrolled. So that kind of puts them in the gray area of where they're family members of ours, but they're not enrolled. So we're not sure how to deal with that sometimes. Then your other question in regards to law enforcement, it's different depending on what tribal police department you go to. The Coeur d'Alene Tribal Police Department, I think it's probably like I'd say 30-40% tribal members are on the police department, and I think there's one other tribal member that's from a different tribe. Then the rest is non-Indian. So.
And do you go to special training? Does the police person who's on the reservation go to particular training as opposed to just general law enforcement training? Is it specific to the Indian problem?
Yeah, to an extent. Within our tribe, within our police department, which, and again, different agencies deal with it differently. But with ours, we're trying to cooperate with Kootenai County and Benoit County, which are the two counties that are within the Coeur d'Alene Reservation. And as of this time, we cooperate fairly well with Kootenai, or Benoit County, excuse me. And the agreement we have is we cross-commission each other's officers. But in order to deal with it, in order to do that, we send our officers down to the state academy, down to post. And from there, they become state certified. So then the Benoit County Sheriff's Office believes that they're qualified to enforce state code if need be. Then also, in addition to that, our officers have to go to to a federal academy, which is the Bureau of Indian Affairs test, I guess. They have a law week, what they call, where you learn about federal Indian law, criminal law, those kind of things, and learn the details and specifics of any country criminal jurisdiction. So our officers do go to both Indian Academy training as well as state academy. So.
One final question with regard to your code. How much flexibility does the tribe have in changing the code or making it specific to your area?
Again, that's kind of a sovereignty issue. I mean, it's up to the tribal council to decide what the codes are going to be. So there's a lot of flexibility to deal with it. And with our tribe in particular, again, we're trying to cooperate the best we can with the counties that concur with our reservation. We, for the most part, we mimic almost word for word, verbatim, state code, except for certain instances where we have to deal with tribal issues. But for the most part, the criminal aspect of our tribal code is detailed or similar to our state code.
So you're basically striving for uniformity, so that there's some ability to also enforce in a uniform manner.
Correct. Yep.
I want to, on our show next week, we'll talk about solutions, but you are really doing an excellent job of illustrating the problem. I want to take this step further, Charpa, in conversation I've had with you. I've learned so much from you about this problem. Let's talk about the problem of hard drugs in this country, which is a very serious problem. And those awful drug dealers that are trying to hook people on drugs, particularly youth, and they're peddling the drugs around the country. The fact that, and you have a case, I want you to talk about it at your tribe, that when these drug dealers find out they're selling cocaine and all these other drugs and all these hard, destructive drugs, when they find out that they set up on the reservation, or particularly if one member of the reservation lets them operate from their home, are we not inviting a really serious problem that all over this country they're finding a geographical location they can go to and are more likely to get by with the selling of their drugs because of this inequity and unfairness? Give us, that was my comment, and then give us an example of what happened on your reservation, I believe in relation to a cocaine case.
Yeah, and like you're saying, Indian country is becoming known as a safe haven for these drug dealers just because of some of the things we've been discussing, like with jurisdictional issues. Tribal police don't have jurisdiction over them because they're non-tribal.
And they're involved in a felony.
Correct. And then the county and state don't have jurisdiction, or they don't want to cooperate, I guess, with tribal police, tribal court systems. Then the FBI have felony jurisdiction, but they a lot of the time don't want to come in for whatever reason. So as a result, no one has jurisdiction over these people, and they have free reign to operate the way they want to. And it's becoming known. I mean, it seems like every year we see more of these people coming in. And like the example that you were talking about, while I was a police officer, at that time I was the narcotics officer for the tribal police there. And I worked a case, started from a rumor of one house, one drug dealer in particular being a drug dealer, where he was staying. And from there I just worked it like any other police officer would have. Then I got to enough evidence to establish probable cause, and I took that before the tribal judge. And we got a search warrant to search that house. So we started preparing ourselves to serve the search warrant. then knowing that the drug dealer is non-Indian, we called up Kootenai County, since that's where the jurisdiction was, the county was at, or where the residence was at. So we called them up and told them what we had. We have the search warrant here. We know the drugs are there. There's probable cause to know the drugs are there. So we're going to be going in here, and we're requesting your assistance to come in here to arrest this non-tribal member when we enter and find the drugs. And at that time, they told me no, that they can't cooperate with us, as they can't go into tribal land. So there's nothing they can do. And
so they didn't think they had jurisdiction either, or there's a liability question.
Yeah. So, so then it's kind of wasn't sure what to do at that point, because we knew the drugs were there. We worked the case. We had fresh evidence that it was there. So we called up the state police, and they told us the same thing, that they can't go in. There's liability issues. They can't go into tribal property and this and that. And then we weren't sure what to do at that point. So as a last resort, we called the FBI, since they have felony jurisdiction regardless if they're a tribal member or not. So we called them, told them what we had, and they said, well, we don't think you have a case, even though we already established probable cause to get a search warrant, so we can't help you. I said, well, if you're not going to help us, the least we're going to do is serve the search warrant and get the drugs, get the drugs off the street. So if you're not sure what to do about that. So
at that point, did you serve the search warrant?
Well, we were preparing to. Then an hour later, the FBI called me back and said, well, we'll be right down and see what we can do, see if we can help you. So they came down and they set up all these different things we had to do, and I did my best to cooperate with them because we wanted to make sure we had a for sure case. Then by then, I was like 2 days later, and there was a key person that told us the drugs are in the house, and by that time, the heat came down on that individual, that witness, and they backed out and didn't want to cooperate with us anymore. So as a result, the case was thrown out. There was nothing we could do. And all this time, all this waiting, we had a search warrant to go in at any second to get the drugs. So
you didn't get the drugs? There was no prosecution?
Correct. And to even make it worse, that particular weekend, we had 2 overdoses.
Yeah. And,
having the warrant to go in, kind of felt a little bit responsible for it. So.
We're out of time, unfortunately, and I have to bring the program to conclusion, but the important news is that you'll be back next week, and we're so pleased you will be, and we'll continue with discussing what are we going to do about this problem that is a nationwide problem with the reservations. You have been so helpful, and thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us again next week, and we will continue this discussion. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station. Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
On our program last week, we had a member of the Council of the Coeur d'Alene Tribe discussing the review and discussion of federal policies, court decisions, and federal laws that have really been a serious roadblock and hindrance to law enforcement on American Indian tribal reservations. Our guest is back from last week now to talk about proposed solutions to this serious law and order question. I welcome back to the program Charpa Matheson, who is an elected member of the Coeur d'Alene Tribal Council, and before that he was one of the key law enforcement agents on the reservation, and he also serves on both a regional and national committee addressing these issues of the Indian tribes around the United States. Charp, it's such a pleasure to have you back. It was so informative last week. Thank you for informing the general public about the challenge that we have.
Thank you.
And I'm so pleased to have Janelle Burt back, who's a regular panelist, and Janelle is an attorney in the state of Idaho, and she will commence today's questioning.
Charpa, again, it's wonderful to have you back and be able to talk with you about this subject. Last time in the show, we laid out what the problem was, but for the benefit of those folks who may be tuning in for the first time this week, or for those people who want to continue and need a refresher, please tell us just briefly, what is the problem?
The problem, I think, in a nutshell, is to say that there's inequality in justice in Indian country. Indian country being reservations or anywhere where tribal governments function. And the inequality is the fact that tribal police, even though they're recognized as a sovereign nation, or the tribal government is recognized as a sovereign nation, the tribal police still do not have jurisdiction to prosecute anyone that comes into the recognized territory of that tribal government. For example, if someone went into anywhere else, different state, different county, those agencies would have jurisdiction to prosecute anybody, regardless of their race. But you go into an Indian country, into an Indian reservation, tribal police by federal law have to ask what your race is. And it's still hard to believe that still happens today in America. There's probably no other place in America where the tribal police or police in general would ask you what your race is to see if they can arrest you or not. But today it's still that way in Indian country. Not only is there the race issue, there's also the jurisdiction in regards to felony crimes. Tribal governments do not have jurisdiction to prosecute felony crimes regardless who the suspect or victim is. So I guess in a nutshell, that's what it is. So.
Thank you very much.
That is well stated. Now, talking about solutions, this is not something that can be solved by a vote of the tribal members or even the council. So, since you're involved with the Northwest Association of Affiliated Tribes and also the National Congress of Tribes, share with us, to inform the public and for their possible support in this campaign, does this include changing both laws within the Congress, and then if those laws change, and you referred to some of those last week, then the courts can also then have a change in decision, because I understand the courts are making their decisions based upon some of the legislation. So share with us what you see and other tribes around the country need in public policy change.
Well, first of all, I think the short-term solution to the problem would be cross-commissioning, cross-deputization.
Between different law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, with the tribal law enforcement agency as well as the local, state, county agencies. Right now, we have a good working relationship with one of the counties within the boundaries of our reservation, which is Benoit County. And we're still working with Kootenai County, and hopefully that'll be resolving and being productive for both of us here shortly. But other tribes, it's not that easy. One tribe in it, for example, is Nez Perce tribe. They don't have a good working relationship with the sheriff's offices down there at all. Down there, there's even talk of county police arresting tribal police officers for pulling over tribal or non-tribal members. So it's very bad down there. So I think the first step, short-term solution, would be to get cross-deputization. Then I think in regards, since we don't have felony jurisdiction, I think one thing we need to do is find a way to make the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, more accountable for the justice that they're supposed to be bringing to Indian country. As of this time, we've never kept any data. We've never told them that there's a problem here, or if we do, we just say it in a word, and so many words, they tell us, well, go back to the reservation chief, go talk to the BIA, there's nothing wrong here. So as a result, we had to live with it. But today, myself at AT&I, which I mentioned last week, which is regional lobbying organization for tribes in the Northwest, we're starting to keep data. We're working on it right now on the dispositions of cases that we hand to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Because right now, just looking at my own reservation, I can mention many cases, probably 90% of the cases that we hand to the U.S. Attorney's Office are denied. Say, since that lobbying organization comprises of 54 tribes, we take all 54 tribes and they have similar results as we do, that number is going to be huge of the cases they decline. So it's my hope that by doing that, we're going to have a better accountability mechanism to provide the justice that we need that's not being provided right now. Then, like you're suggesting, with changes in Congress, congressional action that I think can assist in the injustice, I guess, in any country. I'm hoping that this data, too, is going to be another tool to support us, to say that there's something wrong here, that there needs to be something done. The example I always give when I discuss this is at one time these reservations were recognized as separate totally from the United States, and most of these tribal nations negotiated with the United States as a sovereign nation. So then that territory was set up as their own place to reside and live the way they want to. Then as time went on, the U.S. Congress passed legislation that opened up these reservations to non-Indians, which was the Homestead Act. I can't remember the exact date of that, but it opened up the borders and let all these people in. Then now, I think it was like in 1880, if I remember correctly, is when that act was passed. So since 1880 till today, there's been non-tribal members, non-Indians that have been living within many of these reservations. And now there are 3, 4, 5th generation people that have been living there. And they believe they still have a right to live there. And I agree with them. It wasn't their fault that they were allowed to come in. It wasn't our fault. We didn't allow them to come in. But then later on, like I was discussing last week, the jurisdiction or the ability to protect ourselves from whoever's in the reservation was taken from us, was stripped from us. So as a result, the borders were opened up for all these people to come in that we never had jurisdiction to handle. So the example I always give is saying, like, we open up the border with the U.S. and Mexico. Then Mexico passed a law in the United States saying that you can't have jurisdiction to do anything with these people. So it's like opening up the borders to anybody to come in that you can't do anything about. So that's.
So people could, under this process and this analogy you're giving, people could come in and be very law-abiding and helpful. They could come in, they could be criminals, and yet at the same time you take away how to at least in a very efficient and effective process, address the problem. So there's a lot of blame to be laid at the national policy that's allowed this to happen. When you said that, the first step in temporary partial solution is cross-debitizing with the county sheriff's departments, for example, and that certainly, a lot of things you described would be off of a reservation would certainly be state crimes rather than federal, and so maybe they could at least make an arrest and then later can decide whether it goes to federal court or state court. But if we stop there and we don't do this national change you're talking about, we'll continue to have, won't we, even in those kind of agreements, some real concerns about one jurisdiction. Is it a state or a federal case, and the liability, and if you arrest improperly, then you're subjecting yourself and your agency to lawsuits and liability. So I think I hear you saying that if you really want to solve this nationwide, you're going to have some new national policy.
Yes, correct. Like I was suggesting, it's a kind of a congressional mess, throughout history that made it the way it is today.
Created this over time. It's recreated this nightmare of, it's almost like a jungle of complexities in the law itself, or like quicksand. How do you get out of this?
Yeah. So we believe that it's going to take congressional action to clean it up, clean up this mess that's there now today. And we believe, myself and others in any country, and some of our friends in Congress as well, that this is an inequality issue. And like I was saying earlier, that this type of action, this type of policy doesn't happen anywhere else. There's nowhere else where the police are going to ask you what race you are to arrest you, but it still happens in any country, and most people don't realize that. And a lot of our friends in Congress believe that that's un-American, that it shouldn't be tolerated. So they believe that there needs to be a solution to fix this. So there's a movement throughout Indian country today, nationally, that's called the Tribal Sovereignty Protection Initiative, and we're trying to get all our ducks in a row, so to say. Trying to get everything together and get a feasible legislation that will be able to pass and bring back some of this jurisdiction to tribes. At the very least, make it so that tribes have limited jurisdiction to prosecute non-Indians for different crimes. One of the most prevalent crimes is domestic violence, which I failed to mention last week. A lot of the time there's interracial couples, non-Indian and Indian as well. A lot of the time there's nothing we can do if the suspect is non-Indian. And then the drugs I mentioned last week as well. And so we're hoping that, for these most frequent crimes that we be able to pass legislation that would allow us to prosecute drug dealing, domestic violence, DUIs, whatever it may be, reckless endangerment in communities or whatever. So that's our hope. But there's some people that want to go for the whole gusto, so to say. They want to get all the jurisdiction back, make it geographical jurisdiction rather than subject jurisdiction in Indian country. So it's still in the works, and we're trying to get support. And I've talked to some people some of these lobbying firms that are trying to assist many of these tribes in our efforts to get this initiative going. And they said that a lot of the time, if it's just tribes that are saying this, we're probably going to be disregarded by staffers of these congressmen and by the congressmen themselves. So we were informed, we were told probably the best thing to do would be to get non-tribal support, because the example or the incident of crime doesn't just affect Indians in Indian country, it affects everyone in Indian country, affects the surrounding areas of Indian country. Like down on the reservation, like I was saying last week, I think it's probably 50-50, close to 50-50 of being non-Indian and Indian property, and the population base is split around 50-50, maybe a little more towards non-Indian too. But by allowing these drug dealers, for example, to come in, it affects everybody. So we're hoping that by getting the support of non-Indian people as well, we can show that this is a justice issue, it's a community safety issue, regardless if you're a tribal member or not. So.
And it's a constitutional equality issue.
Yeah.
One of the clarifications before I go back to Janelle, and that is that under the tribal sovereignty, you call it the Tribal Sovereignty
Protection
Act, if, of course, that can be written different ways, and you're saying one way to write that would be to say that all crimes that take place on the reservation are under the jurisdiction of the tribe, and they could both arrest and prosecute. The other one, as I understand it, would be that the tribal law enforcement could arrest for any crime, but if it was a felony, they could hold and maintain and legally arrest until the federal courts came in and took charge and dealt with prosecution. Is that the other way of approaching it?
We can do it like that up to this point in time, but like I was suggesting last week, like I was saying, we can only hold them so long as if it was
But I'm speaking if you change the law.
Yeah.
Is that one of the possible solutions, to put in the federal law saying that in all reservations that the tribal law enforcement can arrest anyone that they have, if they have probable cause to arrest them, and that would solve part of your problem?
Yeah, it would. And that is partly what I'm saying. I guess like one solution is limited jurisdiction. I'm getting some of this jurisdiction back with the crimes that happen most frequently in between tribal members and non-tribal members. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, you are. But the one thing that the federal law needs to do, it appears to me more than anything else, is to whatever is in the code to say that no one can come on the reservation, commit any crime without having someone there immediately able to take charge and make an arrest.
Correct.
That's the first step.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Janelle?
I want to give you an opportunity to speak to something that I'm sure someone out there has been thinking. Why don't we just do away with Indian tribal courts? Why don't we just do away with this whole jurisdictional issue? Why not just say everyone lives under the same rules? There's no boundaries for the reservation. What is your response to that?
And I've heard someone make that suggestion before, and to me, if we are going to live by the same rules, then that's the Indian reservation. Just like I suggested before, you go to a different city, they have jurisdiction to arrest. It seems like if you're going to make it equal, if you go to the tribal reservation, they should have the same jurisdiction as the city jurisdiction, even the same as going to college campus where they have their own police department. They have jurisdiction to arrest. But you go to Indian country, it's different. That's where the inequality is. So it's not an issue of like giving up the sovereignty that's recognized by Congress with treaties over to the state. I mean, it's a sovereignty issue. It's an issue that many people have fought for, many people continue to fight for and preserve today. So,
basically what you're saying then is you just set up, rather than a city boundary, this would be a reservation boundary.
Correct, just like any city, any county, any state, any country. So,
and then your coordination would be between, in let's say other situations, it's between the state, the county, and the city. You may be one of those entities. You may be coordinating then with the state, and of course with the federal government too, as for their part.
Yeah.
But you would be coordinating with these other agencies in the same manner that cities and counties coordinate now.
Correct. So, and I think that's the only way to go about it. Like I was saying before, it's a mess there. I mean, there's all these different people. There's non-tribal members that are fourth, fifth generation that have lived there, as far back as they can remember. And they still have the same right to equality as anyone else.
And what you're trying to do is do away with the safe house for those who wish to commit crimes.
Yes. Yep.
That's your real goal.
Yeah.
At the very bottom.
Yeah, the real goal is community safety and equality. So.
That was really put well by both of you. But may I just add for your reaction to suggesting that not only to do away with a safe house for criminals, but secondly, while doing that, that the tribal government and the tribe itself should be respected and recognized with the same kind of sovereignty that we have in other entities. In other words, I can imagine the outcry if we said we're going to do away with all city police and city ordinances, and that's all going to be taken over by the state, and the cities and the counties would cry out. So why should American Indian organizations be treated differently to say that somehow they would not have that kind of jurisdiction within their boundaries? So I get you to respond to that. You've been such an effective speaker on this whole business, what I call the 14th Amendment, and saying no person should be denied equal protection of the laws. And the way it's set up now, we are making a major difference in how we deal with equality.
Well, first of all, to respond to the first point you made in regards to saying we're going to take away all jurisdiction from cities. Right. In a way, it's pretty similar to what we're discussing if we were to do away with tribal court systems or tribal police. But also to take it even a step back a little bit further is most of these tribes, they, at the time that the reservations were set up, like I was saying earlier, they negotiated with the United States government as sovereign nations. I mean, it'd be like us saying that Canada can't have their own police anymore because there's negotiations there. They're negotiated by separate sovereigns, and it seems like there's still a recognition of the separate sovereign status, but only, to me, in my opinion, is just when it's convenient. When we try to get that separate sovereign status when it comes to criminal law, there's no such thing because the federal government has taken all that away, so we can only deal with our own people at this time. So it's community safety, like you're saying, with the city. Then also it's kind of a historical sovereign nation type of negotiating that setting the precedent, setting the foundation for us to voice our opinion and argument for this. So.
One thing that puzzles me is that for those who are in politics and they advocate law and order, which is very important, but I think if you are totally committed to law and order, as a political leader, you'd want to change this because the way it's set up now, it is not enhancing public safety and law and order because they've created a situation that the tribes have to deal with of allowing people to come in and likely get by with some of their crimes. So I would even contend it's a conservative issue of law and order. Anyway, that's just an editorial comment on my part. But now talking about strategy. I haven't told the viewers yet that you have been chosen by the council to be a voting board member of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. There's a seat set aside on that board for the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, and you have brought this issue before that organization, and they have voted unanimously as a board to back your proposal for national policy change. There are other organizations that are probably viewing the show and stuff. And so tell us a little about your plans to create a coalition. You mentioned briefly on the last show, but I want to get a little more specific that in addition to obviously the tribes around America that are interested in this, how do you wish to go about bringing on other civil rights organizations or other groups throughout the country? I think you're very astute to say that to be successful, a large coalition enhances that opportunity.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And it seemed like in the past we've always dealt with it just like any other political issue amongst tribes, whether it's trust issues, real estate issues, natural resource issues, kind of consolidate with each other and kind of get each other's support on what we're dealing with. And then we talk to our lobbyists, talk to our other people, other staffers that would help us, attorneys, whatnot, and we deal with it like that. And it seems like we've, at time to time, tried to do that, use that same strategy with this jurisdictional confusion. And for the most part, many of our friends in Congress, over recent history have told us that, be snowball's chance in hell to get something like this passed. I mean, there's probably just as many or more non-tribal members that live in reservations or around reservations. Like I was saying, they've been there 5 generations, they pay their taxes, and how can you support this and take that away from them, take away, whatever comfort they have there when they've been there so long. So what I believe, and others that I've been working with believe, that the way to deal with it is to deal with it from a perspective that everyone can understand. And like I've been saying, we've all been saying, that it's a equality right, or equality issue. It's a human rights issue. I think everyone has the right to feel safe in their home, just like anyone else wants to. We all have the right to raise our children in a safe community the way we want to. And but as of this time, many of us in any country don't have that. We want that. We want what everyone else has in America. We want to be able to walk the streets safely, feel good in our homes. And because of that, because everyone can understand that, we believe that we got to address it from that perspective. We got to say this is a civil rights issue. It's a human rights issue. Because of that, I believe we need to lobby for support with other human rights organizations to see that the discriminatory nature of these laws, where like I've been saying, where race is a factor in determining if someone can be arrested or not. So by looking at it from that perspective, I think we can get a larger support base among people that believe in equality, believe in the American way. Then also for with the recent events in America with terrorism and our need for safety and comfort, I think other people could see that there's a need for community safety in Indian country. There's a safe haven for these drug dealers. They, in so many words, run the streets because they strike fear into everybody that's going to go against them, regardless if they're Indian, regardless if they're not. So we can look at it from that perspective as well as a community safety issue. Everyone believes now today that community safety is a priority for our country, for our citizens, for our people. So those are 2 perspectives I want to go about, and 2 strategies I want to utilize, to get this through.
You brought another point to my mind. When you're so effective like that, it creates other ideas and points. For the non-Indian population on the reservations that you have been very much recognizing, they too are at danger, because when these criminals come on the reservation with drugs, not only does it endanger all the members of the tribe, but it also equally endangers the non-Indian families living there. So it would seem to me that they would be very concerned about also trying to solve the problem, because they too want their families to be safe.
Yeah, most definitely. There's a saying that drugs doesn't discriminate. It likes everybody. Go wherever it can, Indian, non-Indian, black, whatever. So, but the issue is, well, to me, I see it more often because of the gray area in the jurisdiction. I mean, if they're in a non-tribal home, the state and county have jurisdiction of them, but they come and set up shop in a tribal home because of the jurisdictional issue. But it doesn't discriminate who they sell to. I mean, they'll still sell to non-Indian or not. So
yes, Janelle, we have about 2 minutes.
Well, this is slightly different than the subject that we've been talking about, but we've been talking you've talked very eloquently about the reservation and about your people and your lands. Tell us what it is like, what your vision is for the people and the lands.
And vision in regards to?
Your vision in regards to, you no doubt are very fond of the reservation, the land, the people that you live and work with, your relatives. What is your vision for them for the future?
My hope is that we can prosper, I guess, and have the hope, opportunity that everyone else wants in America. And I'm not going to say that or sit around and feel sorry for ourselves or whatever. We just want the same chance that everyone else has. Want the same chance to make something, of ourselves. Have the opportunity and chance to raise our children the way we want to, without the fear of drug dealers, without the fear of domestic violence, without the fear of injustice in our homes, in our community. And we want the same opportunity to go to school and to have jobs, have well-paying jobs, so we can buy school clothes for our children, so we can go to school, so we can buy Christmas presents. You know, we just want the same thing that everyone else wants. We're hoping we can do that, and at the same time preserve who we are, our identity as Native American people. So I guess in a nutshell, that's what we're looking for.
Thank you.
Said so eloquently. And may I say, in closing our program, that the Coeur d'Alene tribe has been doing remarkable things in dealing with economic development, and the unemployment rate is very, very low, and that's to be credited to the leadership of the council and what you're doing, and we wish you good luck in all your endeavors, and certainly wish you the very best in dealing with this unfair policy and its change. Again, thank you for being with us the last 2 weeks. Charper, we really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been discussing for the past 2 weeks some national policies that really hinder and affect law enforcement and trying to combat crimes on reservations. We hope you found this program as informative as we have in bringing it to you. And we like to bring subjects to you that are not heard oftentimes on the regular discussion programs, and so we hope that it has informed you in a very, very important way. I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at the same time, when we'll be moving to yet another issue that we think is important in our time, and we would invite you to be with us, and feel free to contact us at any time. Until next week, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.